you see before you on the table 3 4-inch-ish tactical folding knives. We're going to take a detailed look at one of these 3 and how it stacks up against the other 2 right. Gang, Rob here. It's the evening of 11 September 2013, and yes indeed, we're going to have us a knife review tonight. And since you read the title, you already know which one of these 3 blades we're going to talk about. The other 2 just here for reference and comparison. The star of tonight's show is the high-value, large folding tactical blade from Spyderco, the Resilience, big brother to the Spyderco Tenacious and big brother to the Persistence. Let's talk first before we get into the whys, wherefores, nuts, bolts, and the big story. Let's talk about some specifications. What do we have here? Well, we have a blade 4.25 inches long of blade stock that looks about like 3.5 millimeters, maybe 140 thousandths ish, thicker than an eighth. The blade steel is, let's take a look. What does it say? It says here 8CR13 MOV right next to the word Spyderco. Huh. If it's got 8CR13 MOV blade steel, that must mean it's made in China. Interesting. A very interesting trait of this line of knives, the Tenacious line, which includes the Resilience. These are not bird knives with the bird's eye hole. These are Spyderco branded knives made in China. I believe these are the only 3 knives in Spyderco's catalog that fall into that category. I could be wrong, but traditionally over the years, if it's Chinese Spyderco, it's a bird. If it's made in Taiwan, Japan, or the United States of America, it's a Spyderco. So we got something different. Well, these knives have been out for about 4 or 5 years now, and they're different, and they stay different, and they sell well. Let's keep moving along, though. We've got a handle length of 5 1/8 inches, which is kind of interesting, isn't it? Less than an inch longer than the blade. That's pretty efficient blade to handle ratio. Pretty darn efficient. Tip is not dangerously close to the end. That means the pivot must be very close to the end of the handle, and it is. Okay, that gives you an overall length, guys, of 9 3/8 inches, a weight of 5.4 ounces. Not overly heavy for a knife whose blade length is over 4 inches. Not bad at all. Construction, G10 scales over skeletonized stainless steel liners. Can't probably see them in this shot, but we do have phosphor bronze bushings. You know, this knife just hits all the marketing points, doesn't it? Decent stainless steel blade, 4-way positionable pocket clip, G10 skeletonized liners, decent weight. Oh yeah, jimping. It kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it? This knife came out about 4 or 5 years ago. About 6 years ago, a rather famous knife reviewer came on the YouTube scene, and basically every element of this knife are things he crusaded for on his YouTube channel. I speak, yes, of none other than Nut and Fancy. So does this knife really hit the high notes on its spec sheet? Well, let's kind of talk about that. We do have another really popular characteristic these days, a full flat ground blade. And let's take a look at that grind. Well, it's not overly thick behind the edge. It does thicken a little bit at the tip, but through the main slicing or cutting area, pretty thin behind the edge. Satin finished in, well, kind of an interesting way. Looks to me like it's kind of Scotch-Brighted. Doesn't look like a belt sander. It looks like Scotch-Brite to me. Not necessarily good or bad. How about this edge profile? Kind of interesting, isn't it? Most of the belly is very far forward, almost like American Tonto style, with a really elongated leaf-shaped Spyderco blade. Unlike a lot of Spydercos that have come out over the last few years that have a forward finger choil like the military, the Tenacious not only does not have that, but it's got cutting edge all the way back to the handle, which is great for economy, you know, getting the most out of your blade length. But when you close this blade, unless you get your thumb really forward in the choil to catch this piece of tang, if it's back into the choil at all, when that knife closes, that cutting edge is coming down on your thumb. It's either going to catch you right by the nail or on the knuckle. There have been some famous cuts by Tenacious on YouTube for that very characteristic. Just kind of interesting. You just have to be careful when you close it. You don't want to break it over. You want to finish it off with your thumb outside the channel. Ergonomics on this knife are decent. Are they as good as the military? No. But this knife doesn't cost as much as the military. You have basically one saber grip. There's no coming forward. At least if it were sharp, there wouldn't be. Hammer grip, fairly comfortable. Reverse grip. Now let me try with the right hand because the clip is mounted for right hand. Not bad. Of course, not too many people would carry this knife tip down. This belongs to a contest winner, Fringe Sniper. It's in for sharpening. I thought I'd review it while I had it. He obviously prefers right hand tip down. Not bad in that reverse, in the pole cut grip. And the reverse grip isn't bad. I do find the butt end of the knife just a little pointy for wrapping the thumb. Jimping is adequate, very adequate. Doesn't hurt, but it really grabs the thumb. No problem there. Got a little jimping on the liner for deploying the lock. You know, there's just nothing nothing terrible about this knife so far, is there? What about the construction? It is a pillar construction knife, which lets you flush it out without taking it apart. These three standoffs, one in the back, one here and one here, while they are pillars, they are not shouldered into the liners, which isn't necessarily a big deal because you have that locating function done by the lanyard hole, which goes all the way through the knife, through both liners, through both scales, and all the way across the middle. And then the other locator, of course, is the pivot. Not a big deal that these two are not shouldered. Don't really find that to be an issue in rigidity, especially at this price point. However, having said that, a similarly priced knife, in fact a less expensive knife, albeit shorter, the Ontario Rat 1, is pillar constructed with shouldered standoffs. That knife is when it snaps together, it's not moving anywhere this way. I haven't taken this one apart. I don't know how it shouldn't really move because you've got this lanyard hole that is essentially a shouldered pin or a locating pin. Now, I wanted to get into some negatives here on this knife, and as I do, guys, remember it's a $45 knife. I'm going to bring you up close because, see if I can get you. See if I can get you close to this edge. As we run down this edge, I want you to just take a look at the breadth of the secondary bevel and take a look at the line it makes as it meets the main bevel of the knife. See how it's just kind of notchy? And you see how it sort of flares at the hilt? Just not real precise. Again, keep in mind, $45 knife. And then here's the other thing I wanted to talk about. It seems like this knife has no side-to-side play when it's locked up. But never be fooled by that, especially with the liner lock. In order to really check it, you got to disengage the liner lock and then move the blade side to side. And as I do that, let me see if I can get this so you can see it. Be fully up against the stop pin. Listen. That's all side to side, which is part of the reason the blade drops so freely. Now, could I tighten up that pivot and get rid of that side to side play? Probably so. I mean, I know I could. Would it still be as smooth and free? Probably not. But that's really not the disturbing thing about this particular Resilience. I want you to take a look at it closed. Can you get a good look at this blade centering? It is fairly far off to the left. Now, remember what we just saw. We just saw a very loose blade, side to side, with the locking liner pushing to the right. We would expect in that condition to see the knife, if it's going to be off center at all, we'd expect to see it off center to the right, because the pivot isn't restraining the blade against the force of that liner. But we've got one that's pretty significantly off to the left. So I started digging into this and looking at it, and I found something else, and I'm not sure I can get the camera to pick this up for you guys, but I'm going to try. Look at, now we're looking right at the bottom of the knife. I want you guys to take a really close look at the very base of the grind, if you can see it. If you notice, there's been much more material removed on this side of the knife than there has on this side of the knife. That means the blade itself is closer to the left as it's ground at the base. I got a feeling that continues all the way down the length of the knife. And the reason that blade's off center isn't because it's crooked in the handle, it's just ground that way. I don't know if that came across on camera. I'll see it when I review the video, but I believe we've got a blade that is just ground askew. Don't know how many Resiliences exhibit that, but this one certainly does. You know, if I tighten up that pivot, that blade is going to come closer to the left. I mean, it could possibly rub if I tighten it up. It doesn't now. Anyhow, that's just, I guess, the reason I'm spending so much time on that is that that's just what you expect when you spend 1/3 of what a similar knife would cost if it were made in America, or 2/3 of a decent Taiwan-produced 4-inch tactical folder. You're going to get, no matter what company has their name and their bug on it, no matter what kind of quality control procedures they have in place, you can buy a 4 1/4 inch tactical knife for $45, but when you do, you got a $45 4 1/4 inch tactical knife. A decent one, but that's what you got. Now let's stack it up here against its two comparables. Remember, blade length on the Resilience 4 1/4 inches. On the military and the Cold Steel Recon 1, 4-inch blades. Handle length. Remember, 5 1/8 on the Resilience. The military's is 5 1/2. 5 3/8 on the Recon 1. Overall length, the Resilience 9 3/8, exactly the same as the Recon 1. If I line them up butt to butt, you can probably see that a little better. And on the military, 9 1/2. It's the longest overall of the three. How about weight? Now remember, I got a knife here with a crooked blade and a lot of blade play at 5.4 ounces. 1 full ounce heavier than this military. And let's see, I'm going to disengage the lock on this, and I've got 0 side to side play. And it's still a pretty smooth knife. You can't get a military to drop free all the way because there's no room for the liner and the detent ball to get out of the way of the blade. But trust me, guys, this thing's like butter. So it's an ounce lighter. It's probably stronger. It costs 3 times as much. Very precisely made knife. And also, something that this knife has phosphor bronze washers, but they are tiny. Look through the vacant clip holes on the off side of the knife. You can see the edges of the washers. We're talking about an outside diameter of less than 3/8 of an inch, supporting a 4 1/4 inch 3mm blade. Yeah, they can put phosphor bronze washers on the spec sheet, but are they really giving this blade much support? Doesn't look like it. Could they? I don't know. They're about half the size of the washers in the military. They're thicker, but not near as big as diameter. Even the Recon 1, much, much larger washers. It's very hard to see the washers in a Recon 1, but trust me, a lot bigger. Let's look at the steel comparisons. Of course, the knife that costs 3 times as much has S30V steel. The $65 Cold Steel, Japanese AUS 8A, annealed AUS 8. A lot of people will tell you that 8CR13 MOV is analogous or comparable to AUS 8. I've sharpened quite a few knives in the 8CR steel. I've sharpened a whole bunch of knives in AUS 8 and a lot of Cold Steels with AUS 8A. I've also used them. Had a chance to test edge retention. Trust me, guys, 8CR13 MOV is not as good an edge holding steel as AUS 8A. And Fringe Sniper's blade is in for sharpening, and I wanted to show it to you before I sharpened it. It's got a pretty good roll at the tip. So I've got a little bit of roll at the tip and a pretty good run of small chipping. Just from my experience, guys, the CR13 steel behaves a lot more like 440A than it does AUS 8A. Yeah, that's all I have to say about that. It's certainly not S30V. Okay, let's get these guys out of the way. Kind of finished talking about this knife. By the way, good pocket clip. Looks like the same clip that's on the Endura and Delica, but not blackened. Stainless steel and polished. Hardware is decent. I kind of think when you look at these flush screws, very reminiscent of the military or the paramilitary too. I kind of wonder if Spyderco doesn't ship its own hardware over to China before these knives are assembled. I don't find the same problems with this hardware I do on other Chinese knives. I did want to talk about the G10 real quick too. I know it's called G10. It's advertised as G10. You know, you'll hear a lot of people say that the Chinese G10 on Spyderco knives is different. It's not as grippy as the American or the Japanese G10 that you find on Spyderco's. I'm not really sure this is genuine G10. It might be a material that's close in composition and appearance, but I just don't see G10 get this smooth and shiny on any other knife I have that has it. But if they say it's G10, then we'll say it's G10. Bottom line, if you have $45 to spend on a tactical folding knife and you want a big one, should you buy a Resilience? Well, gosh, I don't know. I guess if you had to have one and you had 45 bucks, it would be probably the best knife you could buy in a 4-inch plus blade for under $50. But I mean, how long does it take to save $20 more? You get really grippy G10, you get an awesome grip, you get a bank vault lock, you get a better steel, in my opinion, and a better blade. Both budget folders. 25 bucks isn't going to kill anybody. And then, you know, granted, this is a long way away dollar-wise. But let's face it, guys, if you love knives, sooner or later you're going to buy a military anyway. So what do you think? I'm kind of interested to hear the comments on this video because, you know, this knife has sort of been a darling of the YouTube knife community since it came out. There was so much excitement surrounding the Tenacious. When the Persistence and Resilience came out, they were met with great fanfare, and this over 4-inch knife for under 50 bucks really got a lot of good press. And again, I don't fault it for what it is at its price point. I just don't think it's a wonder knife that's worth twice what it costs. It's still a Chinese produced knife. And it looks, acts, swims, quacks like a $45 Chinese knife. But it does it better than most. And that's all I have to say about that. Grace to you all and peace from God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. And remember, the word is sharp.